We need a selfie stick. Which is
Okay,
good morning.
we're on. So it's October, Indian summer in the UK.
Definitely.
Very, very lovely. Got the best summer for 20 years, I think.
Yeah.
And it's the morning after the session. So without further ado, we'll crack on with a special shout out to Spinning Greek, who, without whom I wouldn't have even come across this album, which only arrived yesterday. So I'm not best placed to talk very much about it. It's the Nils Frahm live album called Spaces, double album. He's a keyboard player, very Steve Reich influenced. We listened to a track called Says. He sort of has a barrage of keyboards. Possibly is a bit like a kind of 21st century Vangelis or something, possibly, I don't know. Anyway, that was how we started.
We did. Then I went for, there's a new tribute to from the Red Hot organisation for Grateful Dead, which is called Day of the Dead, and it's basically a multi-CD or very multi-album set. Lots of people interpreting, concentrating on the interesting side of Grateful Dead, which is their songs and their experimental side, rather than the jams, which jam bands have never really been my thing, actually. And this is a single. I got the CD, but this is a single off it, which features basically what is a National and Grizzly Bear doing a version of Terrapin Station, which is quite epic, actually. I mean, it's an epic piece. Anyway, I actually heretically prefer it to the original. Actually, it's an EP. It's got a version of If I Had the World to Give by Bonnie Prince Billy on it as well. Really good value, actually. Very nice cover. But yeah, great version. I mean,
really good.
Starts off almost sounding like a live studio, and then gets into much more interesting electronic, which was a connection, I think, with the Nils Frahm thing, ambient kind of territory, and a great cover as well.
Very good, possibly the tune of the night for me.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, the whole set's worth getting, and also because it's going to a very good cause as well. So it's but good job, I think, National and Grizzly Bear.
Staying with a kind of psychish feel, we had the I think it's the second Traffic album. I absolutely love Traffic. Is this just called Traffic? I think it is. So this is the version that had Jim Capaldi, Chris Wood, Steve Winwood, Dave Mason. Yeah, it's the band. And we listened to the track called No Time to Live, which was fantastic. Yeah, just a really great album. Just they don't sound like anybody else. Within a millisecond of the first kind of piano chord, John could tell it was Traffic.
Yeah, there's a distinctiveness about them as well.
Really great.
I think this is what I played next. I can't remember. Yeah, it was. Then went on to I think I played this a session before. Played another chunk of the from the Jim O'Rourke The Visitor record, which was his second or third to last record, which is one continuous piece. Masses. I think it took him over a year to put the whole thing together. Lots and lots of instruments overdubbed. Very kind of dense, interesting kind of sound. Yeah, worth getting. It's also out on vinyl, but it kind of defeats the purpose of it, which means you have to turn the thing over halfway through, which is not really the point. Amazing recording, amazing production.
I am just realising that was the first thing you showed, John, because otherwise I wouldn't have shown Grateful Dead's Wake of the Flood.
Okay.
Afterwards.
Oh well, we're out of sync.
We're out of sync, but we
No, I don't think it was actually.
We're sort of in the same kind of ballpark.
Yeah. No.
This is the Mo-Fi incredibly beautifully mastered remaster of one of the best recorded Grateful Dead albums, and we listened to the entire Weather Report suite.
Yep.
Prelude Part 1 and Part 2, Let It Grow. Really very good.
And then we went on to probably the band who I guess are the closest to being 2016's Grateful Dead in a weird kind of way, which is Wilco, and their new album called Wilco Schmilco, and played the first track, Normal American Kids. I mean, kind of A lot of people are focused on the lack of production on this, but I think it's a bit deceptive actually, because I think there's a bit more production going on than people are giving credit to. This is more, this is quieter and more peaceful than the last album, Star Wars, and much more song-based as well. No, very short tracks, most of them 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes long. No kind of soloing at all, actually, on it at all, the whole record.
I thought it sounded really great, actually.
Yeah, and we're off to see them in November, next month. Actually.
Yes.
On the last date of their tour in London.
Something about the atmosphere of that track got me sticking a track from Sonic Youth's Washing Machine album, which I have to say a huge shout out to Ben Costello, who had gifted me this as some VCLT a while back, and I've been really enjoying it. And we listened to the track called Panty Lies, which was an instrumental, and just again sounded very, very fresh and contemporary. Lovely pressing actually. This
one of the best 2 or 3 Sonic Youth albums. And now we have a kind of commercial break. This is a plug for a book. I worked in a magazine called Musics in the mid to late 70s. I was one of the editorial board. And Thurston Moore, who was massively influenced, it's basically a magazine about improvised music, sound art, field recordings, all kinds of stuff. And Thurston Moore was massively influenced by this, and he's just published via Ecstatic Piece, which is a label, basically a massive, it's like a telephone directory style.
Bigger than a telephone directory.
He's just published every single issue of Musics as a kind of compendium, which is here, and he's selling it from his site. He launched it in London a couple of weeks ago, which is really nice. So thank you, Thurston, for doing this. And he was just full of praise for what influence it had over him as a musician developing. There's also an index that's coming to go with the book, but it's huge. It weighs a ton. He's really designed it for libraries rather than for personal consumption. But I think it costs about over 100 quid. But it's on his website, Ecstatic Piece, Music's magazine.
There's a personalised card to John from Thurston.
Very nice to have that inside. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, carrying on with our sort of general theme of interesting music.
Actually, I played a record before that.
You did? I was going to say,
how did
this one happen?
I don't know. That's right.
Now it makes sense.
That's right, yeah. Don't know what the connection was with there wasn't really a connection with Sonic Youth at all, actually. So went to Gentle Giant, who are kind of UK prog, folky kind of prog band around the same time. Much sampled. Madlib's a big fan of Gentle Giant, which is not an obvious connection. And played the first track off The Runaway off In a Glass House. And this is a reissue that's on their own label. Kind of, prog, inflected with there's a little bit of Zappa going on there as well.
And a bit of folk.
And a little bit of folk as well.
Very UK.
Very UK.
Yeah.
Gentle Giant.
This is very UK. King Crimson's Red. Some people think this is their best album. I think it's a pretty good one. We listened to One More Red Nightmare with the John Wetton, Bill Bruford and Robert Fripp combination, with obviously some Mel Collins appearing on sax as well. Dark, brooding, kind of quite menacing. not sort of not particularly uplifting, but really intense music, and the fantastic drumming of Bill Bruford.
I saw that band live a lot. I was almost a kind of groupie, I think. Actually, I must have seen them about half a dozen times around the time.
And you were saying that Bill Bruford was very influenced by previous, what was his name?
Jamie Muir who was on Lark's Tongues and Aspic. He was in the band for quite a short period of time, but had a big influence on and Bill, and because Jamie played with a lot of the improvisers.
That was the connection with the book.
In fact, he's in Music's magazine.
Yeah, exactly.
So so then we must have had a break.
Yes, we had. So we'd gone into one particular direction, came back, and went in a different direction.
Basically, little mini tribute to Bobby Hutcherson, who I realised. I mean, when I was looking for his records after I've got so many records with Bobby Hutcherson on. I mean, not only his own records, but also obviously with Dolphy and with Andrew Hill and other people as well. Wonderful player, wonderful man by all accounts as well. People say he was an extraordinary guy. and played a track off one of his later and kind of overlooked records, Linger Lane. Played the track N2 or NTU off that, which is also got some fantastic drumming from Harvey Mason.
Yeah, really good. So it was the Bobby Hutcherson half hour then happened, and I played a track from Total Eclipse. I think I played the track called Total Eclipse, which is a Bobby Hutcherson original tune. This is the album that features Harold Land on sax, Chick Corea on the piano, and the rhythm section is Reggie Johnson and Joe Chambers. This is one of the direct metal mastering Blue Notes, which actually I thought sounded really nice.
Yeah.
This is an album that I kind of got given last year when my dad's oldest friend died, and I inherited some of his record collection.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like the sound of those, but I think they sound fine. Actually, I've got lots of them. Then went for a bit more later, Bobby Hutcherson as well, off the album Knucklebeam, which has got we're in the dreadful cover zone again, and played just a classic Little Bee's poem off that, which he wrote for his son. This band with great solo from Freddie Hubbard, George Cables, Manny Boyd, Hadley Callum, James Leary and Eddie Marshall, which is pretty much his touring band at the time. So this is another late period Blue Note. Little Bobby.
And there was still more Bobby to come. This is an album that I seem to remember FXP had shown the vinyl, and I've been looking for it, and it was very expensive, so ended up buying the CD, and it's Head On, Bobby Hutcherson, another kind of early 70s album. We listened to the track called Mtume, another dedicated to Mtume track, and then had a long conversation about Todd Cochran, who John reminded me actually really is Baete.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. He flips. I think he is Todd Cochran at the moment. But that also kind of got us looking at the Never Enough Roads blogspot, which is really worth checking out. Where there's basically everything Baete has ever performed on, actually kind of downloadable, I think. This is a great album, and in fact, this CD reissue actually has nearly a whole album's worth of bonus tracks that weren't on the original album, including a couple of Todd Cochran penned tunes, one of which, Togoland, is a 15-minute spectacular, which
fantastic
was
piece.
a fantastic piece, probably a little bit too long for us to listen to yesterday, as we had a lot of music to get through, but actually really recommended this CD re-release. Even
if you got the vinyl, it's worth getting, actually.
It is.
Yeah. And my last Bobby Hutcherson, I don't know why I focused on the late period, actually, but I went even beyond Blue Note and went into his Columbia albums, played the track off the album Highway 1, the title track. This again features Freddie Hubbard, George Cables, Eddie Marshall and co as well. There's two albums on Columbia, both of which are great, actually. The other one's very, very hard to find. It's a real favourite of the UK DJ Giles Peterson, the other one. Nice, great composition as well, either one. I remember reading somewhere that musicians really like to play the composition.
And also kind of interesting time signatures on a lot of these, very kind of, rhythmically very interesting. So the next track was kind of inspired by Bobby Hutcherson, who obviously used to play with Eric Dolphy. And this is the Far Cry album with Book a Little, and we listened to the track called Tenderly, which was just the sound of Eric Dolphy and his alto sax. Really beautiful.
It's kind of all you need, really.
It's all you need. It's absolutely kind of effortless perfection. Just really amazing. Highly recommended.
Great album. Two connections with the last one. One's Mal Waldron, who of course played a lot with Eric Dolphy in the early days, and in fact a couple of the albums which are called Eric Dolphy albums are actually Mal Waldron albums. They were retitled, I think. And also Steve Lacey, who is, in terms of effortless control over the saxophone, in his case soprano saxophone, is similar level to Dolphy. Played the track The Seagulls of Christiansund, which is off this album called One-Upmanship, which is a Mal Waldron quintet with Steve Lacey, and also features Manfred Schoof on trumpet, Jimmy Wood, ex-Duke Ellington bass player, and Makaina Shoto, who's a South African drummer. Came out in late 70s. Beautiful composition, actually.
Really lovely. Great playing from Steve Lacey as well. So the connection for this next piece of music was the Duke Ellington connection. Although, in fact, I don't think is it Jimmy Wood.
He didn't play.
Didn't play on this album, but this is a great album. This is Duke Ellington's Far East Suite that was recorded in the mid '60s, possibly early '60s. Anyway, it's just appeared as a very, very cheap CD that also has masses of kind of alternate takes. We listened to the track called Isfahan, and this is an album, I guess, sort of influenced by kind of Middle Eastern scales and music, and just sounded, I mean, it's just great.
Just great Johnny Hodges on that track as well.
Fantastic Johnny Hodges.
Effortless.
Yeah.
I don't quite remember what the connection was to the next one, but I played, probably didn't much of an excuse to play Nefertiti, off Nefertiti, which is always just strikes me as being just such an interesting piece, but there's no solos on it. I mean, basically it's the...
apart from Tony Williams.
Apart from Tony Williams, who's just kind of amazing. And it's like a concerto for drums almost. Really.
Yes.
Anyway, classic Miles Davis period, amazing band, possibly one of the best bands ever, I guess, along with Coltrane Quartet, in my mind, anyway.
And sort of actually the only Miles album from that period that I realised I didn't have, so I'm definitely going to be getting that one. Right, I think we might have had another break at that stage. And had another break and kind of recognised...
Also realised we hadn't played any women.
There'd been very little women present in our session. So I think a couple of sessions ago, John and I had popped out to one of our local record shops, and he'd recommended this album, which is Ricky Lee Jones' Pirates, which I had never heard, which is an incredibly well-produced and just really interesting album, full of great songs that kind of go all over the place. They never kind of quite end up where they started, and a fantastic, stellar band of musicians, pretty much almost the whole of, well, Steely Dan kind of represented, particularly on the track, the title track Pirates that we listened to, which incidentally sounds amazing through the system. I've been going through a bit of a hi-fi upgrade time, and this was this was the introduction to the new phono stage, which is the iFi iPhono, for those of you who are interested in that kind of thing. That actually had we had to make a little modification about a third of the way through the session, which suddenly sounded really, really good.
Yeah. I have no idea what I was talking about.
No. Sorry.
No, it does sound... No, all I know is it sounded really good.
Sounded good,
yeah. I then went for a slightly more obscure album by a woman called Ezra Mohawk, who actually was one of the first members of the Mothers of Invention back in the day, and produced two fantastic records which have been recently collected, well, not recently, been collected together on Rhino, handmade. This is her third album, which is more inconsistent than the first two. By the way, if you get the chance to get those first two albums, they're classics, actually. And this is from a third album, which is on Private Records, and played the track called Holy Trinity, again with a kind of stellar lineup of musicians, including Richard Davis, and on this track, some great drumming from Bernard Purdy. She's kind of almost uncategorizable, Ezra Mohawk, kind of somewhere between folk and soul, and a little bit of a Laura Nero thing going on with her as well.
And certainly some mini Ripperton.
Minnie Riperton, again, amazing folk, but really interesting artist.
Yeah.
Check her out, I think.
The next album, you know, sometimes you pick up albums because the cover looks interesting, and then you listen to it and it wasn't worth the pound that you paid for it. But actually this, slightly different case in point, there's a record shop which used to be called Soul Jazz, is now called Sounds of the Universe, who keep emailing me with loads of amazing kind of 70s records that they've just got in the shop. One of them was a record that I already had, and it was this album, Maxine Nightingale, which I'm sure is very cheap to pick up. But it was the track called Bless You, which is a John Lennon original tune, and a very kind of atmospheric, phased vocal, kind of very Roy Ayers-ish sounding track.
I thought it was a Roy's track.
Yeah,
exactly.
it was really nice.
Yeah.
So if you pick that, if you see that cheap, it's worth getting for that one track.
There's a lot of British jazzers on the record. You notice Kenny Wheeler.
Kenny Wheeler does that.
Frank Ricotti on vibes as well.
That's right.
Something about that track, I've been having a bit of a Van Morrison phase recently. I fallen in and out of love with Van, and this is from one of his 80s albums, which tend to get a bit overlooked, I think, from the album Common One, and played the track Summertime in England, which is one of his long vocal improvisations, featuring lots of great playing from. It's got Pee Wee Ellis on it, who did all the arrangements as well.
Amazing horn and string arrangements on that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Just basically is like a 2-chord vamp.
Yeah, completely, all the way through. Yeah. Lots of references to James Joyce and God knows who else on there as well.
It was then time to dig into some soulful harmonies, and again an album I picked up pretty recently on the UK. Is the Bell label UK, or is that Tom Bell's label? Anyway,
Bell label's American label. Yeah.
American label, Tom Bell's label. The Delphonics, produced by Tom Bell, a song written by Tom Bell called "La La Means I Love You." I just love this kind of early 70s, late 60s male vocal groups. Actually, just some fantastic music. Sounded very good, and an absolutely classic song.
Yeah, covered by Prince, of course.
Yes.
On Emancipation. I can't remember which one's next. I think I played Funkadelic.
You did play Funkadelic, because
yeah. Then something about the vocal arrangement reminded me. There's Funkadelic records are really weird actually, but you always remember them for one track quite often. And obviously this is One Nation Under a Groove, which has got the classic One Nation Under a Groove on it. There's also a track called Groove Allegiance, which I just heard somewhere a few weeks ago, which is just great. It's got written by Junie Morrison and Bernie Worrell, who are both in the band at the same time. Great vocal arrangement, but also some fantastic bass playing from Skeet Davis, Rodney Skeet Davis. We were talking about Mono Neon at the time. Anyway, everyone should have this record. If you haven't got it, there's no excuse really. Yeah. But don't play the second track, Groove Allegiance. Great track.
Yeah. Often a bit invisible. Another amazing vocal group, and we seem to be having a regular Motown slot every session. This is the Four Tops Still Waters Run Deep album, and we listened to their version of Reflections,
which is brilliant.
And produced by Frank Wilson, although it sounds like it could be a Norman Whitfield production, but it's that real psychedelic soul. I think it's 1970. Great album. Again, quite cheap to pick up.
Which I don't have. I'm going to pick up, definitely. Then, there a few groups carried on regardless, really, with the vocal tradition right into the 80s, and the Manhattans are one of those groups. And there was a weird connection between this and the first track, because one of Jerry Garcia's favourite songs was Shining Star, which is off this album, After Midnight, and we played the track Shining Star, which is a great song, actually. The Manhattans just carried on making records irregardless of any trend, basically. And they're all great. They're all 90% ballads, and they all sound fantastic. Can't really go wrong with them.
Right, there was an interesting
Columbia Art Department at the time as well.
Very familiar, the vocal refrain at the beginning of that song. I couldn't quite remember. I knew that there was a reggae track which sort of had a sort of a version, and it was actually this one. It's a 12-inch single by the MC Brigadier Jerry, and the track is called Jaja You, and it's not the greatest singer, but a great rhythm track, and I really remember this from 1982. I'm sure this will be a shout out to Doug. I'm sure he knows about this. Sounded great, and a really nice little connection.
Yeah, very much so. I didn't bring much reggae with me this time, actually. In fact, I couldn't find the one I had brought with me. But anyway, I've been kind of having a listen back to, I've been basically thinking about clearing out some stuff out of my record collection, particularly from period of the 80s, which doesn't seem to be standing up too well.
Or
The
90s.
90s, sorry, period of the 90s. And when actually been listening to Tricky again, who does stand up incredibly well. I mean, his stuff sounds so radical still. UK artist out of, people, I'm sure people know him, out of Bristol, and played the track Ghetto Youth off here, which doesn't in fact feature Tricky, except on the programming.
No.
And it's a kind of spoken word piece over a very raw, weird sample, actually. Some very odd stuff going on with the horns in the background. From the album Pre-Millennium Tension, which I noticed has just been reissued, which is quite interesting. Much more kind of fanfare.
Yeah, worth checking.
Yeah.
I just had my last reggae selection was inspired by of watching a video that Doug from Canada had made, and he did a great sort of history lesson about the Viceroys. Reminded me that I do have a couple of their albums, and I revisited this album, which is called We Must Unite, and we listened to the track called My Mission Is Impossible, which had the fantastic Roots Radix rhythm section, Style Scott. It seems to be called Stike Scott on here. Flabberholt, Bingy Bunny, Gladstone Anderson, Scully on percussion.
Something called Bobby on guitar.
Yeah, that's right. And Steely on the piano. But a really great album all the way through. And I just love the kind of harmonies of these three guys. Yeah.
Then we must have had a break.
Yeah.
Because we seem to have gone into a very freestyle for the last bit of the section.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I think we were drinking kind of 10-year-old aged whiskey by
by
this
this
stage.
time, yeah. So everything went, the connections went. So I went for the track Where Flamingos Fly off the album of the same name, Gil Evans, which is a kind of, don't often see much, actually. It was early 80s.
Never seen it.
Well, actually recorded in the early 70s. Transition period between when he was playing much more arranged orchestral stuff to being slightly more improvisational electric thing. Great album, actually, on Artist House, which means that it's great, also really good pressing from around that time. Yeah, really nice record. Features Howard Johnson, usual suspects, really. Bruce Ditmas, Sue Evans, Lenny White, Herb Bushler, so forth as well.
Yeah.
Nice record.
I then played a track by João Gilberto and Stan Getz. It's just, I don't know if it's a reissue or if it's ever been out before, but anyway, it's from some live dates in San Francisco from 1976, and it's just called 76, the album, and we listened to a fantastic version of Aguas de Marco. I mean, I just think there's something about the quality of Gilberto's voice and the way he syncopates with his guitar, which is just remarkable. It's just beautiful. You were saying, Miles said he could sing the telephone directory.
Exactly.
It would sound amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Really, this is cheap as well, so worth picking up.
Told by Brazilians that the kind of way he syncopates voice and guitar is kind of pure samba. Actually, it's actually transposing what would have been the samba drumming to a guitar, which kind of makes sense actually in a way. Can't really think of much connection between João Gilberto and, except they're both great songwriters, and Townes Van Zandt. But I've been kind of I've never seen much discussion of Townes on VC. I mean, to me, he's one of the absolute best songwriters ever, and this is probably my favourite record of his. Actually, it's live, recorded at the Old Quarter in Houston, Texas, and I played the track Lungs, and all fans of True Detective will recognise that song from the first series of True Detective. So Townes, kind of tragic figure, covered by thousands and thousands of different artists. This is a nice on Fat Possum Records from Townes just solo at the Old Quarter, Houston, Texas.
Again, there was absolutely no rhyme or reason why I would suddenly decide to play this new EP from Floating Points, which is called Keeper, which just basically has a track per side. So Floating Points, UK act, basically Sam Shepard, and he's a keyboard player. He actually sings a bit on one of these tracks. For Marmish Part 2. For Marmish is on their first Elenia Floating Points album. This is just another version. Kind of like sort of Mike Oldfield meets the synth sound on Small Hours by John Martin. with a little bit of kind of
10-year-old whiskey thrown in.
a bit of 10-year-old whiskey and a bit of Pat Metheny falsetto vocals in the background. Yeah, I think this guy is really interesting. I think he sounds quite fresh and original. So, Floating Points EP, keeper. It is a keeper.
Absolutely no connection. Well, there was, I think it was the Noodly keyboard, actually,
Yes.
that brought me on to, again, quite an unfashionable, I seem to be featuring unfashionable records by artists, though. By Alice Coltrane, late Alice Coltrane, with, I think it was the last record she made with Warner Brothers, and right on the edge of her getting into more pure devotional music rather than jazz, and played the track Spiritual Eternal of it, which has her playing something sounding like a kind of incredibly cheap organ. I mean, it's a kind of single note.
It's a Bon Tempi.
Bon Tempi, yeah, but with an amazing orchestra
Yes,
behind it, and with Charlie Hayden and people.
Very
playing.
weird juxtaposition.
Yeah, very weird juxtaposition. This is a great record. It's got a much longer track I didn't play on here called Los Caballos, which has got some amazing Latin percussion on it as well. So yeah, Alice, fantastic, really. Always interesting.
It was by this time that my wife was saying that we were sort of sounding like we were listening to 60s porn movies with our soundtrack. I played a track from Moonbeams, which is a Bill Evans trio recording, the first recording that Bill Evans did after Scott LaFaro died. And it's basically a CD full of ballads, which sound quite smooth on first hearing, but as ever, once you really start listening to Bill Evans, the kind of the way he's using chords and his phrasing is just really kind of different. And we listened to the track called If You Could See Me Now.
It's Eddie Gomez, isn't it, in Paul Motion?
Well, this is a weird CD, has absolutely no information on it at all, so I'm not sure who's playing on it. It's definitely.
So my last track was just because I like it, really. I think there was something about the bass line on that track which made me think of Ron Carter's bass line off, I never know how to pronounce this, or Liloquy Valley, I think it's pronounced. I think his third or fourth album for Blue Note. Freddie Hubbard, Herbie, Ron Carter and Tony Williams. Great bass line, much sampled by all kinds of people, actually. But also, always really liked Herbie's Blue Note records. I think they're kind of great compositions. Yeah, you can't really go wrong with Herbie.
And clocking in at 32 minutes 35 seconds, I think we need to say good night or goodbye.
You say good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for watching.
Thank
Long
you
video.
for watching.
Sorry for the long video.
Love all the comments, and yes, see you very soon.